I got a fun little change of pace. Hopefully you enjoy it. I won enough tickets from Commander to be able to put together a vintage deck with what I didn't have. Basically, everything you see here that wasn't already in the Commander deck was picked up with Commander winnings. So um, I have no tickets left. It took all of my tickets. I ran out of tickets before I ran out of cards I would like to have here. But at any rate, we can. I can always get there. So I threw together a concoction of some sort of sideboard here. Wasn't quite sure. Actually, I think this isn't quite right. I think Skeletal Scrying was in the main, and City was in the side. Although it probably should have been City in the main with Skeletal Scrying in the side. So anyway, I'll leave it that way. But just for game one. So anyway, yeah, I threw together some like random sideboard just with no idea of what I might be facing. And since I had no clue, I didn't even finish the sideboard. Plus, I really didn't want to go to the trouble to go get the cards. So this is what I'd be playing with. And I initially had a worse version of this deck together. It was about 10-20, 10-30 when I actually put together this version. So I'm going to just play those games and not the crappy test versions that I was using. For all I know, this deck could still be crappy as well, but it was producing some pretty good results, as you will see. So, it was format vintage, and this will take just a bit longer. And yeah, right about there. So right about 10:30. So you can see like I put it together, did okay, did all right, lost, did okay, lost, retooled the deck, and then did very well. So let's start with Aranera here, and I'll run through some games. So hopefully you'll have fun. So this is, of course, an attempt to recreate the deck for uh, vintage as it is meant to be. So let's run through some games. My opponent. Oh yeah, right. No commanders. Wow, that's a habit I'll have to get over. So anyway, this was a solid enough hand to keep. Lead off with first turn Soul Ring, no disruption. This is good. Opponent has a fetch into Time Walk. Not going to fight over Time Walk. You can have your very good rampant growth, which is all it really is when you play it on turn 2 like that. Turn 3 goes for Monastery Mentor. I kind of had her pegged on Mentor, so I force it with Ponder. Opponent's already down to only one card in hand. This is fantastic. Time for me to reload. And my opponent splits it. Let's see if we can get the split. So Mox, Mental Misstep, Force of Will, Thirst. Yeah, I can afford to take Force of Will, Thirst and fuel up my graveyard for Treasure Cruise. I will keep graveyards up because it's pretty relevant in Vintage, especially when they're playing blue or when you are. All right, so I go for a Thirst. This is, of course, a bait spell. Doesn't draw any bait. I try a Brainstorm. This is now me digging for mana. And I go ahead and take away my opponent's white. So here, hopefully I won't have to force a will a Mentor. Um, that's the goal here, is just to get to the point where I can find myself in actual mana drain. Opponent has Dig Through Time. Okay, that's one. I don't know if I'm going to force this one or not. I think I let it go, yeah. So I let it go. My opponent goes up 2 cards, but 2 cards versus my 8, it's not worth it. And the 2 cards I have are even better, especially since I put this on top with Brainstorm. My opponent activates top in response and gets twisted double Snapcaster Jace. I'll follow the Mind Twist with a Ancestral Recall, or a Treasure Cruise in this case. Same. Opponent's got no cards in hand. Did get to set up the top with top, and did not find a recovery. Yeah, so I did have Scrying in the main here. All right, so I'm going to try to reverse, do a back play with Will. My opponent has a counter, so I make an offensive Force of Will, like a Force of Will to push, and sneak out a Crucible Strip Mine, pass the turn. I don't want to exile my Strip Mine to Yawgmoth's Will, so I'm going to Strip Mine during upkeep. Let's get the white, keep attacking the white. Usually you want to attack blue, but my opponent has plenty of blue, and I don't want to fight over Mentor at all. Click, on the other hand, I have two different tutors in my hand. That is fine. My opponent takes Skeletal Scrying. Does not want me drawing more cards. Totally agree with that. But that frees me up to Demonic Tutor here for a Mox Pearl, which I can then Merchant Scroll into Ancestral, pass the turn. So why did I get Mox Pearl? Because I was thinking about Vampiric Tutor for Humility, which I believe was in the deck at one time. Or I wanted to set... No, I know what no, I have Mode in the deck. I wanted to set myself up. Humility's in the sideboard. So I wanted to set myself up so that I could... so we're going to waste Strip Mine here again and then get Jace down. I want to set myself up, if I could finish my sentence, so that I could go get Moat if my opponent managed to get a Mentor on the table. That was the game plan. And then my opponent's offense is reduced to just a 3-1. Well, anyway, Gorilla Shaman's going to come down and nosh on my opponent's board over there. And Jace the Mind Sculptor is going to sculpt some mines to victory, but first bounce a Vendilion Click, who will never, I don't think, come back down. But if it did, of course, I would simply bounce it again. It would be probably a Black Lotus play to get that thing back down, and that just wasn't happening. Anyway, opponent would have to play Black Lotus. I would eat it with Gorilla Shaman. They'd have to play it on their turn, and then I would just bounce it with Jace. So, all right. So game 2, my opponent gets first turn Ancestral Recall. That's not too good for me. And turn 2, land Mox, Sensei's Divining Top. I don't like where this game's going at all, but I'm going to go ahead and Mystical Tutor at the end of my opponent's turn here and go get Force of Will. Play a land and pass because now I have Mana Drain Force, and then I could potentially Vampiric Tutor off of and use the mana somehow. Ooh, opponent's got Library. I see why they're letting me do whatever I want. Unfortunately for them, I have the answer. So I'm going to go and play Wasteland. And then I did not use it immediately because my opponent could have activated top and then drawn a card in response. But now that we're having a nice little fight over a Fact or Fiction, I am going to actually take out their red because it's game 2 and I expect my opponent has sideboarded in Red Elemental Blast. Unfortunately, didn't work out too well for me as my opponent hits a land drop and it's the same color and then digs through time to start trying to get back up to where they can library. I do Ancestral during upkeep to see what I draw so that I can decide if I want to vamp during upkeep. I decided to do exactly that. Because I drew a blue source, I can now go ahead and Ancestral a second time using Treasure Cruise and pass for the turn. So this is a nice little recovery here. Alright, not too worried. I brought in Humility in this game. I'm not quite sure why. Certainly not good here facing a Jace. And I think I'm going to get punished for this quite badly. So he's doing very well up until this moment. Opponent mental missteps a Ponder. I go ahead and misstep back, finding a Merchant Scroll. So go ahead and just scroll into what are we getting? Dig? Yeah, dig. And pass for the turn so that I can dig with Counterspell back up or just have a Counterspell up. This may not be the wisest thing though, considering I could have pushed a dig through without having to fight about it. And really, there's not much else that's... Like, there's not much else that my opponent's going to do that's really bad here, so it might have been better to just get the cards right away. So I'll go ahead and fire off a dig during upkeep. My opponent has Pyroblast. I'm going to fight over it because I need an answer to Jace. My opponent has Pyroblast number 2 into a Consecrated Sphinx. That's not cool. But look at that nice little top deck. Okay. Well, let's try this. Let's twist what I can. I didn't get much of anything. Throw Humility down. The problem is, of course, my opponent has Jace. Over and over, Jace. Okay, so if this will fires off, I might be able to win this game. It does not, so I just go ahead and give up. At that point, it's done. I'm not going to get through Jace. I'm going to take chip damage for the next 8 turns. And due to the clock issue as well, I just wanted to move on to game 3. That Yagwell would have been an amazing... I mean, that was an incredible top deck, right? I would have Ancestral Recall off of that. Treasure Cruise off of that. Boy, get a Wasteland going. Like, I don't know. I might have had a chance there. But, how do we get out of this? Okay. But we'll have to make it a game 3 and see what happens. So I thought I had that game in the bag till Jace came down. I actually mulligan away of turn 1 Ancestral in order to keep a turn 1 Gorilla Shaman with no lands, because the Ancestral hand did not have Mental Misstep and the second hand did. And my top card, which I did not put on the bottom of my library, is Mental Misstep, and my opponent Ancestrals right away into Black Lotus, into Fact or Fiction. This is gross. And I ended up giving my opponent Snapcaster Dig through time. So this does not look winnable, to say the least. It's a library. Holy smokes, this is bad. Sure. My opponent is brutalizing me with type 1 cards. I'm going to go ahead and Merchant Scroll here and hope it resolves. It does, so I get Ancestral. The only good thing is that Gorilla Shaman does a really excellent job of preventing your opponent from just going wide. Although it didn't stop that Soul Ring. Ooh, Mox Sapphire. Let's try an Ancestral. Can we do it? Opponent has Mana Drain in response. We cannot do it. Okay. I guess I could have waited for him to fetch and tried to fire it off, but I hadn't hit a land drop yet, so I figured any land drop, and I could have played Dak into a Theft. Alright, so my opponent's Snapcastering into Ancestral. I'm going to attempt to counter that successfully, as it turns out. Well, maybe there's a chance here. We still have Dak, and we do have Dig. Dak and Dig. I'm back, and I'm forced. Okay. Passing for the turn. My opponent forced a willed with Dig Through Time. The other card that's been exiled is the Flashback Ancestral Recall. Well, there's a Mox. Let's Nosh on the Soul Ring. And I miscounted. I cannot dig through time. Okay. I will pass in that case. I actually have mana advantage here. I'm just way behind in cards. I'm going to try to dig. Again, I really want some cards. Can I have some cards? It looks like I can. Alright, so I take Black Lotus and Mana Drain. So the reason is, I hate to do this, but my opponent's down to only 2 cards. So 2 minutes. I counterspell and engineer explosives. It would have taken out triple Mox and a Lotus. Probably not good for me. Gives me some mana to brainstorm with, or do something with. I actually shuffle away a Force of Will, 2 counterspells here, I believe. Yeah. Only because I'm trying to actually win the game. I'm hoping I can actually win the game before, my opponent times out. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do, but so I can always keep the counterspell on top if I want, or I can shuffle it away and try to find some more card drawing. I opt for that. So we'll go get black mana and that stupid humility. I don't know why I kept sideboarding this in, but I guess because I did see some nasty creatures. I'm going to go ahead and just play it here. And this way, I don't see my opponent chipping away for 15 points of damage, and now I don't have to fear much of anything. Gorilla Shaman's already eaten a pretty heavy meal, so I think we're okay trading him off here. And I do need to draw something other than land and mana sources, non-interactive cards. Yeah, I think sideboarding Humility after this game I realized it was a mistake. When it goes for Wear and Tear here, I try to protect Humility, only because if my opponent's trying to kill Humility, then that means I probably should try to protect it. Failing, of course. I could have tried to counter the Treasure Cruise. I knew the opponent had the counterspell in hand, but frankly, the problem is we're at 17 seconds. 8 seconds, 6 seconds, 3 seconds, and time. Sorry, you do have to win in 25 minutes. So, not the most exciting win, but this game kind of told me that my sideboarding strategy was not the best. So, I used that game to inform me, and as you can see, in the rest of these games, I sideboarded better and I did a lot better. So now I'll check out the games where I actually make the right choices. As a matter of fact, I remember what happened now. I didn't have any sideboard cards when I played that person. I sideboarded nothing in. So then I went and got the 8 cards you saw. and played game 2. And my opponent leads off with turn 1 library. Yuck. Okay. Still, I have some answers. I was able to I was able to buy everything I needed for this deck just about, except no more wastelands. So I'm short 3 wastelands, which is a pretty tall order. I need to win like 180 tickets worth of prizes before I can pick those up or something crazy. All right, so anyway, my opponent is correctly utilizing their library, but I do get them to force a will right here, which is, I actually don't care that much. Dak would be nice, but I don't care that much about Dak. I figured they would have a follow-up to recover for their library, and that's what I was going after. That's why I saved the force of will. Also, the real plan for their hand, if they did not have a follow-up, was to play that, and look what I hit. That was nasty. Dig Through Time, Mana Crypt, and Jace. That's awesome. All right, well, if your Jace is gone, start using mine. Look at this lovely thing. All right, so I get to Ancestral Recall off of a Black Lotus Merchant Scroll. Ancestral Recall finds Gush. Gush finds Library of Alexandria, and I'm able to play Library. And I am sitting on Jace, Library, 6 cards in hand, Force of Will, Mental Misstep. Like, how insane was that? I had almost nothing, and immediately flipped the game just like that. So that was pretty cool. And so my opponent scoops, and for some reason did not opt to play 2 out of 3. So I'm not sure what the deal with that was. But I did find an interesting person here. So look at this insane hand. This hand is so good against blue, and terrible against like shops or something. But I decided it's so good against blue, I'm going to keep it and just hope they're not shops. And my opponent's got a fast start with a Dak Faden. I would have liked to have forced a will to Dak Faden, but I cannot. However, I can go after some mana sources over there. Yum yum. Give me that red. And now if my opponent uses Dak Faden to steal my Sapphire, I just tap a mana and kill it. If I can't have Sapphires, nobody can. That's my strategy. All right, so we're going to start attacking Dak Faden. Just plinking away, kill his Mock String upkeep. Opponent's digging, he's dacking away a Dig Through Time. I don't quite understand that. I'm drawing off library. I have an Ancestral Recall that is sitting in my hand because I actually have to discard. I discard a Moat, draw during upkeep off Ancestral. Opponent goes for Lotus. I was hoping they would pass priority so I could just chomp on it. Gets a Time Vault. I don't understand my opponent's logic here, actually, considering that I could just eat the Time Vault. But I think they were just having a really tough time figuring out what to do against the Gorilla Shaman. So I go ahead and DT for a Lotus. That way I have extra mana if I want to be able to... yeah, okay, we're good. So if I wanted to be able to do something like Yogg Will on the next turn, having the Lotus here was really nice, but it also set me up where I could eat the Time Vault in response to like a Voltaic Key, even if my opponent had a Wasteland. So that was game 1, and game 2. Basically, despite my opponent's fast start, I had a library start, and my opponent had no interactivity for it, and then Gorilla Shaman made it even worse for them. All right, so my opponent's got another fast start, but I have a nice, solid defensive hand, minus one little thing, which is mana. So, can I find an island? My opponent missed a land drop, so he gets Flooded Strand, Mox Pearl. I go Tundra, Mox Pearl, and miss a land drop. Oh man, what is going to happen here? Opponent goes for Key. I probably should have just Mental Misstepped it, but I hate Mental Misstepping that card. It's so bad. All right, so during my opponent, fortunately I draw Mox. During my opponent's upkeep, I thirst and I throw away Tolarian Academy and a Mana Drain because I have everything I need, and I just don't. I can live without the Mana Drain. So during my opponent's upkeep, I go for Ancestral. He Mental Missteps. I Mental Misstep. He mental missteps. I mental misstep. He force of wills. I red elemental blast. And ancestral resolves. Yes. And this is my opponent's upkeep. He draws for the turn. Goes for Dak. I force a will that with a force a will, actually. Disenchant a Mox, play a Lotus, and pass for the turn. So now I've got mana drain. I could have mind twisted for one up, crack my Lotus, but that doesn't seem like a good deal for me. Much rather use it to play a Notion Thief. Problem is, I need one more black or one more blue to feel good about trying to put Notion Thief into play. My turn, however, my opponent goes for Thirst. It's my turn. I do feel fine about this. Notion Thief in response. I'll draw 3. Thank you. He can discard 2. Game over. So that was game 1 and 2, and then I offered him a second, opportunity to beat me, and in the rematch, we'll see how he does. So this is a very, very sketchy keep I have, but my opponent's keep looks pretty bad too. Sacking a Lotus Petal to Brainstorm, it's not really where you want to be. Opponent's dumping tons of artifact mana in play, so now I didn't initially have my opponent pegged on it, but now I'm feeling like they're playing Paradoxical Outcome is their deck. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set up here, which means if I can get this Notion Thief down, I'm thinking that they're done for. And my opponent goes for Thoughtcast. I can't counter that. Untaps their Mox Opal, so now they could have anything. Pyroblast, Ancestral, who knows what. I gotta pass for the turn. I still don't really have a counter spell here of note, but I will shuffle away a land and cast an end of turn Factor Fiction and hope to find one. Opponent Ancestrals in response. I mental misstep that. Opponent Force of Wills that and gets his Ancestral off. And then I don't know what happens, but gives me a pile with all 5 cards. That had to be an error. Well, Mox Monkey's happy, and I'm happy. Double mental misstep here. Opponent Time Twisters that hand away into an even better one. Okay, let's eat the key, because that's the most dangerous thing over there. Alright, we're just going to town now. I got a hungry monkey over here I gotta feed. Gotta get him off my back. Alright, so opponent tries for an Ancestral. I'm going to mental misstep that. It goes for a Force of Will. I will happily drain some Force of Will mana. Your delicious, delicious will. Plays a Soul Ring, which is odd, into Time Walk. So I'm just going to nosh on the Soul Ring and chill out, because I don't want to tap any more blue here. I'm not going to force him to use the top or anything, but plays Mana Vault into Demonic Tutor. I'm going to let all that stuff happen. Goes for Tinker. There's one I'm not going to let happen. My opponent has no cards in hand. And with the Mox Monkey able to do very mean things here, my opponent just packs it in. Now, had my opponent not given up here and failed to use their top and allowed me to go to my turn, then on my turn I would have waited for mana drain mana. I would have used that mana to attempt to destroy his Sensei's Divining Top. My opponent would have, of course, activated top in response, and I would have activated Soul Ring and one of my Moxes to attempt to destroy it again, which would have actually killed it. It would have drawn a replacement card, but then I would have had top off the table, which is where I want it to be. So he needed to use the top right away if he was going to. Anyway. But my opponent rightly gives in, and I have to mulligan my first hand, but I see a Force of Will, and I think I put that on top. I don't, actually. Okay, so I'm looking for... Okay, so I don't put it on top because I'm looking for... I don't have anything to force with. I'm on a hard cast a mana drain, and I'm looking for refill. So that makes more sense, actually. Alright, so end of turn, I have an opportunity to destroy some mana, so we're going to do that. We'll take Key Came down. Just got to watch out for... its companion, Time Vault. Ooh, there's some card draw. Thirst for Knowledge is very nice. During my opponent's upkeep, I will Thirst and pitch up Mox Pearl. Very nice. I like that. Excellent. Opponent goes for Grim. Let that happen, because I have Dak Faden. I play Dak, attempt to steal the Grim. Opponent actually plays correctly, which is nice. But this is vintage, so you would kind of expect them to play correctly. I go ahead and take another turn, and alright, shields up. We're going to draw and discard, throwing away Demonic Tutor, which is insane. But I Yawgmoth's Will, which means I get to do even more insane things and go get myself a Time Walk, fetch up an Ancestral Recall. On my turn, I get to Gush. I'm Dak Fadening. I've got Jace running. Yeah, I'd say at this point the game's probably over. My opponent would say so too. It went just a little bit crazy off that Yogg Will, so that's why I threw away the Demonic Tutor. I did not need it on that turn, and I was going to cast it off the will in order to, as you see, Ancestral Recall. In fact, off the will, what I played was Time Walk, Demonic. So, an excellent way to close out a game. Alright, here we go. And now we've got Saijim playing something different? I don't know. I think this was a control on control. So that guy was playing combo. And I believe Saijim here, Sejim, I'm not sure. I give up. Anyway, I believe that this opponent is playing control. And because I don't know, either way, it's good if I can get my Gorilla Shaman out early. So I slam it off of Mox. Opponent plays Stony Silence. Okay. So I play land and pass. He's definitely playing control, but that means Monastery Mentor usually. So there's something I can do here, something I should have done, but I kind of missed what I should have done until now, I believe. And what I should be doing is eating my Moxen to fuel up my treasure cures. The Moxes aren't doing anything anyway, so now they're at least mana sources again. They've gone from being permanent mana sources to being Lotus Petals, but they're still mana sources. That Vampiric Tutor is very nice there, obviously. Opponent plays Mox Emerald. Is he playing 5 Moxes and a Stony Silence? I don't quite understand that. Alright, so end of turn. I go ahead and fetch a Wasteland so that he can no longer Pyroblast. And with Pyroblast out of the way, I'm going to push for and hope he doesn't have Flusterstorm. Force of Will I can live with, because at least I 2-for-1 my opponent there. Alright, Mana Drain puts me in the driver's seat again. I'm going to continue to beat with the Shaman. I don't eat my opponent's Gorilla. I don't Gorilla Shaman. Blah. I'm not using my Mox Monkey to eat my opponent's Emerald, because I don't want to give them fuel in the same way I gave myself fuel. Now that I've drawn Academy, of course, I kind of miss the Moxes, but it's okay because if that'll be something I can do with future Moxes, so. Alright, push for damage. Opponent's down to 9. And goes for a gigantic dig. That looks very tasty and an excellent source of fuel for my dig through time. And my opponent uses Occasion to play Monastery Mentor into Mox Sapphire. This is not good. This is Moxes don't do anything. I'd kill it out of spite. Alright, so I draw a card, and we're going to go for a gigantic dig through time. Okay, finding a Gush and Mystical Tutor. Alright, so I'm in a Mystical Tutor here. When it attempts to Mental Misstep it, gets more guys with Mentor tokens. I think, is this the one where I totally dropped the ball? I don't remember, actually. So I go get Factor Fiction so that I can use the rest of the mana to Factor Fiction, and I take Ancestral Brainstorm and pass. Yeah, I think this is the one where I completely screw up. Alright, so it's my opponent's turn, and he was low on cards, but he found another. This was very key here. Another source of cards there, and I should have blocked his 3/3, and I end up paying for it big time. But I also made a huge mistake, as you'll see soon enough. So again, I should have. I think I respond to this with a Brainstorm and I find a Mental Misstep, so I can push the Ancestral through, and I take another turn. Alright, for the next turn, I Yogg Will into Gush, into Ancestral. So, and then I completely screw up. So I had 2 mana off of Tolarian Academy, and I used one mana to play Soul Ring, and then attempt to tap my Soul Ring so that I can cast my Time Walk so that I don't lose. And whoops, I completely forgot that Stony Silence was out and lose the game as a result. So had I taken another turn, I could have played a land, tapped Academy and Underground Sea. So I would tap a 3/4 mana, cast Demonic Tutor for 2, and use the last 2 mana from the Tundras and cast Moat, and then pass the turn, and then I win. But I'm an idiot. All right, well, that's okay. So I get to sideboard, which is good for me, and because I actually have sideboard cards now, and we'll see how game 2 works out. Well, this is a pretty savage hand. It's got all kinds of defenses. My opponent can even look at it and weep. I'm cool with you scooping in response to that hand. I would not blame you, actually. This hand's very good. All right, so I play Tundra. My opponent plays Time Walk. Another excellent Rampant Growth over there. I don't think I want my opponent to have Rampant Growth. I'm going to Pyroblast for tempo because I have such a strong hand. And go for a immediate Merchant Scroll. Also, if I didn't do that, I would have had to discard on this turn. Opponent attempts to force it. I try to force back, and it sticks. So he's down to 4 cards to my 5, and he's behind on a mana as well. Opponent plays Jace, but I sideboarded in Snapcaster and Blasts. Blastcaster Mage is about to go get me some Ancestral action. My opponent tries to Pyroblast. I mental misstep that and Ancestral it up. Opponent preordains. I think about mental misstep and decide, nope, I'm okay with saving it for Pyroblasts and Ancestrals or other mental missteps. Alright, so during my upkeep, I'm going to Mystical Tutor and go get Yogg-Will so that I can play a land and Pyroblast Jace number 2, or is that 3? I'm not sure. Anyway, don't want him on the table. Let's get rid of him. And for my opponent's turn, he plays Dig Through Time. I believe I'm going to Gush in response. No, I think I let it go. I let it go because I have Mind Twist backed up by Mana Drain, so it's fine. Opponent's up to, 3 cards. Not a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Mind Twist for 3, and I get Mentor, Mental Misstep, Pyroblast, none of which address Mind Twist, which is fantastic. So my opponent top decks Mentor, and I Mana Drain, and then I just cast a Gush off the Mana Drain mana, which is unfortunate as it turns out because I had a library hiding in there, and had I actually gushed the way most people do by paying by paying the island price, well, then I could have actually started using my library. So now I'm just going to sit pretty. I'm going to hide my library in my hand and hope that my opponent gives me nothing to counterspell. Meanwhile, I'm going to beat the tar out of him with a Snapcaster Mage. All right, I finally hit 7. So now we get to do an amazingly saucy turn of library, draw, Time Walk, Mox, land, pass, draw. Kind of totally, absolutely absurd. So I think my opponent might not win this game. Opponent's at 1, 5 cards in hand. I have 5 counterspells. Yeah, I don't think they're coming back from that one. So let's move on to game 3. It's so nice to play like real control. And look at this beautiful hand here. It is scary because it doesn't have blue. It doesn't have defenses, but boy is it beautiful with that library right there. All right, we're going to library it up. I'm going to wait because I may want a mental misstep, and if I do, that means I want an 8th card in my hand. Okay, no need to do that, so we're going to play Island Mox Pass. I could deploy more mana, but I'm not going to. My opponent tutors up an Ancestral Recall. I go ahead and draw during his upkeep. He tries to Ancestral. I try to mental misstep. He mentals back and gets his cards back up to in his hand. But he's just keeping pace with library here. Not a big deal. I find an Academy, so I drop down to 6 cards in hand only because I can Factor Fiction and Thirst for Knowledge them back into my hand. So I'm not too worried about that. So let's make the attempt to do exactly this. Factor Fiction. Opponent tries to Pyroblast that I cannot Pyroblast back, but I can Mana Drain. And that opponent then tries to Force a Will. I've got to burn a Pyroblast on that. I really need the Factor Fiction to keep my hand full for the library. So I'm going to take Gush, Mox, Tundra, giving up Jet and a Mox Jet and a Force a Will. And on my turn, we're going to use the card drawing of the deck to ultimately find an insane series of cards which involve Red Elemental Blast, Ancestral Recall. Opponent has Force of Will, though, for a Dak Faden that he pushes through, and I actually run out of steam on this one. I'm not quite sure why I sideboarded in balance. It seems... I guess I was really worried about the Mentor tokens. Alright, well, I've got a Force Will and a Mental Misstep. Opponent tries to Dak Faden, and that's what I was waiting for. Notion Thief in response. Opponent has Force of Will. I can actually hard cast Force of Will, thanks to the power of Tolarian Academy. And I'll take 2, thank you very much. Excuse me. Finding a Brainstorm into setting up exactly what I want on the top of my library. We're going to attack Dak. And my opponent has Sudden Shock. I can respond to that. And then he draws 2 and discards 2. I have no idea why. So at the end of my opponent's turn, I think I will go ahead and just draw 9, I believe. 8. Now I do have to be careful because I'm short on time. Very short, actually. I'm also short on cards in my library. Alright, so a little hard to see what's going on here, but basically I'm getting mana on the table. I get a Gorilla Shaman on the table. I munch my opponent's mana sources and pass. And I am trying to play to time, so we're going to attack Dak for now. Casting a Crucible, a Dak Faden, which I target my opponent with. My opponent finally gets smart and targets me with Dak Faden. But this finds me a Snapcaster Mage. I go ahead and target my opponent and attack Snapcaster a Red Blast, blowing away Dak, and attack my opponent now. I have really short on time. Alright, so my opponent sacks Flooded Strand in order to cast something. What is he casting? Big Cruise? Looks delicious. How about if I mana drain that and strip mine my opponent's land? Got him in the strip mine soft lock. I target him with Dak Faden again. Replay strip mine and pass. I still have 2 minutes on the clock, but I'm pretty sure I can deal the remaining 6 damage to my, or 9 damage. So 3 attack phases. My opponent has nothing going over there, and I have still got 9 cards in the library, so I'm feeling pretty good about this situation here. Have I already used Yawgmoth's Will? I believe I did not, actually. So I still have Yawgmoth's Will, but with 2 minutes on the clock, I probably wasn't going to be playing it. I just have to take my win where I may. So I thought it was pretty cool. And for the last set, I'm playing against Karatok. My opponent definitely was challenging. All these opponents were. And that makes it, I think, more interesting. So, alright. I get to lead off with Mox Tundra Pass. So good. My opponent has first turn Mystic Remora. I'll try to mental misstep that. He'll mental back. I'm going to try to mental misstep that. To me, if he's got Mystic Remora, it means that he's also got probably Mox's Soul Ring, that sort of thing. And I've got Gorilla Shaman in hand, so I would rather fight over the Remora. Because why else would he play it and then want to just tap a bunch of mana? And sure enough. Alright, so it's fine. Oh, there's a library. All I need is a red source, and then I've got this game, right? Sometime I'll draw a red source. Problem for my opponent is he can't really do a lot here. Alright, Force of Will's good. Because if he does, he knows I've got mana drain. So like he can't. And I'm looking, you know, anytime my opponent leads off the way this guy did, I'm assuming Paradoxical Outcome again is the deck that I'm facing. I see a Thirst for Knowledge. It's almost a certainty. Thirst for Knowledge, I'm going to let it go. Opponent discards Misty Rainforest Force of Will. Who discards Force of Will? Probably the combo player. Alright, Notion Thief. So now I just need a black or a red. He goes for Thirst again and discards a Mox Emerald. Okay. Well, there's a second Force of Will. We're 23 cards down and still haven't found a mana source. Opponent repeals At Moat, I replace it with he repeals Mock Sapphire, and I discard a Moat. So some kind of repeal and replace thing over there. Anyway, but he doesn't really use the window to do much of anything. And I am now in library mode, still missing mana drops. Try for a Soul Ring here. Opponent has Mental Misstep. Okay, not gonna fight over that. Opponent vamps at the end of turn. I'm gonna go ahead and gets. I don't know if he got the Sapphire or if he got whatever his follow-up play is, but I assume it's got to be more than just a Sapphire, right? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and draw, and we're gonna try and disenchant that Soul Ring. Don't need him having that much mana. He already, but he's got a mana drain. I'm gonna let it go. Really just like to find a red mana. That'd be real spiffy. Or a black. That'd be cool too. And you are going to see me punt a game really, really hard here and not get punished for it. Well, you'll see. This is probably my worst play of the night. So I'm playing perfectly up to this point, or near perfectly, as good as I can. Opponent goes for Paradoxical Outcome. Like as perfectly as I know how to do, if that makes sense. Has a Force of Will backing it up. I have, of course, Mana Drain. And then in response, before I Force of Will, I'm going to dig through time and grab some cards that I would rather Force a Will with. So I then Force a Will with Treasure Cruise because my graveyard's pretty empty. And it all works out. All right. So now, surely I'll find some mana. Well, I do, but I use it in a very stupid way, as you're about to see. So I dig for Mana Drain. What am I doing? Well, I'm setting myself up so I can't lose, except for some reason I get super greedy with Jace. See, my opponent had cast a Vampiric Tutor on their turn, and I just had to know what the top card was. Just had to know. For no reason. Thinking that a Force of Will would be enough. Well, as it turns out, is not enough. My opponent Time Walks, and then goes Yawgmoth's Will. So I Force of Will back. One card in hand over there. Flusterstorm. Oh, wow, I've screwed up big time. Because this means, oh man, this is such a screw up. Okay, so my opponent gets land, Mox, Demonic Tutors for the Lotus that I tucked to the bottom, Gushes. Oh boy. Well, if you want to see Paradoxical Outcome going off, this is it. However, I'm not going to give up until they actually kill me. This is the best set of 3 anyway for starters, so you've got to be fast this game, fast the next one, and fast the next one if we play 3. Plus, this is a high, like, technically, this is a deck that has a lot of technical requirements, and as you can see, my opponent screws up really bad. Instead of flashing back Paradoxical Outcome, they brainstorm, thinking they would find a blue, and they do not. And that means I get to untap. And if I get to untap, I am not going to throw this game again. So we're going to go Mind Twist for 4. Yeah. Opponent forces it, which I expected. Just makes that Mind Twist that much juicier. I Mana Drain. Of course, this is post-combat, so I'll get the mana next turn. And I take out Tendrils, along with Paradoxical Outcome and a Snapcaster. Opponent loses the flip to Mana Crypt. No Crypt flip, and says something about how badly he screwed up. Of course, as you know, I had the turn completely, the game was completely under control, totally on lock. I Demonic Tutor for Jace and tap out so my opponent can go off. Luckily, saved from my own stupidity by my opponent's error, but that wasn't pretty. So hopefully I can make up for that in game 2. And this is a very reasonable keep. Opponent probes me, Ancestrals, under the assumption that now I'm gonna. This was a little bit. This was attempting to next level my opponent. My opponent Ancestraled after looking at my hand, so he is a artifact mana heavy deck, but that doesn't mean. I mean, he's not going to draw Mox every game, right? So I decide, since Ancestral puts him up to 8 cards, I'm not going to Mental Misstep, because if I Mental Misstep the Ancestral, he has a Mental Misstep. I know for a fact he does, because nobody casts Ancestral into a Mental Misstep unless they have, when they've just seen the misstep, right? Unless they have a playback. So if I were to have Mental Misstep the Ancestral, And then my opponent misstep back. Then he goes down to 7 cards off of the Ancestral precisely and doesn't discard. But by not countering and hoping he doesn't draw a Mox, which he did not, my opponent actually had to discard, so it was draw 3, discard 1, which is a lot better in the long run for me. And I know that my opponent still has a mental misstep, which I can, play accordingly. He goes for Mana Vault, I attempt a misstep, and down comes a misstep. But that is fine, because we've burned through it, and I've got 2 cards out of his hand now, whereas he would actually have 6. I actually have more cards in hand, even though he's the one who Ancestraled. Of course, that's because he's got a card on the table. Uh-oh. This is not good. Oh, that's really bad, actually. Okay, so he's going to get a chase running. And as for me, I've got Dak Faden, and I am going to try to dig something up. I throw away Tundra Library. I believe I regret that later, but I figured Library was looking a little slow. And with active Jace running, I didn't have much time. Oh gosh, Jace on a time walk is so brutal. I'm the only one who should be doing stuff like that. Anyway. Oh, I think this might have been a game that's not technically pretty, but rather a function of time. Anyway, I go for a Gush here, which gets mana drained. So, since that got mana drained, I'm gonna go ahead and fire off a Mind Twist for 3, and hope this prevents whatever he was attempting to do with that drain. He draws a card off Sensei's Divining Top, and I take out Paradoxical Outcome and a Will, and I steal a Mana Vault so that if he has a Paradoxical Outcome, he really can't do much of anything with it. And with 3 minutes and 46 seconds on the stack and lots of mana and a Jace, my opponent actually scoops it up here. I think the Mind Twist kind of wrecked him. So that'll work. On my turn, I was going to, of course, plus up Dak and then dig through time. But yeah, losing Yogg Will and Outcome, I think Yogg Will especially, is huge for that deck. So kind of a funky game 2 there. But hey, I'll take it. So anyway, those are the games, and you saw some wins and some losses, and certainly an interesting and fun deck to play. It's a nice diversion where I'm still playing the deck, which is what I enjoy most about Magic, is playing decks that require you to make decisions, but do a lot of preparation, a lot of homework, lots of practice, and lots of decision making. Those are my favorite kind of decks, particularly blue ones, but it doesn't have to be. However, it was nice to be able to play with some power cards. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do this some more. If you all enjoyed watching this video, let me know. Kind of tells me whether or not I ought to continue. I will certainly try to put together a reasonable sideboard, but honestly, this is mostly what I would be using, and then probably a handful of cards for Dredge and a handful for Shops. So it's not going to be that much different, but I guess we'll see. And given the way that my opponents were running today, I probably could cut the moat, make it a sideboard card, and just run Skeletal Scrying in the main or Snapcaster in the main. Probably Snapcaster. I'm not sure why I'm not playing him in the main now that I think about it. But I do like having the moat because of Junk Like Mentor, but I don't think the games really are about that. It's also very, very good against Shops, but again, I don't know that it's hard enough to try to get this on the board. And so maybe it's not worth it. It's really hard to say. Well, at any rate, I won't solve it tonight. So I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time with more Commander content.